Good morning and welcome to Hour of Power with Soledad O'Brien. We are so excited today. I am Burnadette Norris-Weeks, and along with Kathy Eggleston and Michelle Austin Pamies, we are bringing to you Hour of Power. A formal introduction of Soledad will be done in just a moment, but first, the Women of Color Empowerment Institute is a 501c3 organization with the mission to enhance and expand leadership by women of color. We do this in a number of different ways, and we invite you to be a part of the many programs that we do throughout the year. Please join us and check us out at nationalwomenofcolor.com. You'll find a lot of different things that we're doing, even this very month. We believe that you will find our Hour of Power enlightening and motivational. Make sure that you keep up with us with all of the activities, again, at nationalwomenofcolor.com. Due to COVID-19, our fall leadership conference has been canceled. However, we have a lot of programming in store for you, and we will continue to bring you all of these programs at no cost for the remainder of this year. If you are interested in membership, you can find out more about us, again, at nationalwomenofcolor.com. Your membership and contributions support our operations and allow us to continue to bring you high-quality programs. Again, visit us at that website. AARP is a sponsor for this morning. Thank you, AARP. We also thank specifically Dion Polite for being longtime supporters of the Women of Color Empowerment Institute. We will have a few polls during this session, just two, but we would very much like for you to please complete the polls, give us some feedback. And now, Kathy Eggleston will introduce one of the directors of the Women of Color Empowerment Institute, will introduce our speaker for the hour. Kathy.
Thank you, Bernadette. Hello, powerful women. If you came on early and overheard us chatting, you know that we are in for a real powerful treat today in our quest for leadership development and support for women leaders. Soledad O'Brien is with us. She is an award-winning journalist, speaker, author, and philanthropist who anchors and produces the Hearst television political magazine program, Matter of Fact with Soledad O'Brien. Now, Ms. O'Brien is the founder and CEO of Soledad O'Brien Productions, and she also reports for HBO Real Sports, the PBS NewsHour, WebMD, and she's authored 2 books. She's appeared on various networks from Fox to Oxygen and anchored and reported for NBC, MSNBC, and CNN. She's won numerous awards, including 3 Emmys, the George Peabody Award, an Alfred I. DuPont Award, and the Gracie. And in fact, Newsweek magazine named her one of the 15 people who make America great, and we do not disagree. Now, with her husband, she's founder of the Powerful Foundation that helps young women to get to and through college. And you can follow her on Twitter at Soledad O'Brien. We are so excited to have with us Ms. Soledad O'Brien, and I think Michelle is going to be in for us.
Yes, Ms. Soledad O'Brien, we are so excited to have you speak to us today, and I am so privileged to be the first to ask a question of you. We often wonder why there's not more positive coverage of minorities in the media. Additionally, or to be more importantly, we do not see more of an equal opportunity type of negative coverage of the different racial and ethnic groups in this country. Where is the poverty and the crime in the white communities, for example? Why do you think this is the case? And what do you think could change this reality?
So first and foremost, thank you for having me. Good morning, everybody. It's so great to be chatting with all of you. And thank you for that first question. You know, I never really thought about coverage as positive and negative. I think coverage has to be realistic, and in every community has its positives and negatives. And every human being, right? The virtue, by virtue of being humans, we're complex and complicated. We can be amazingly kind and turn around and be very terrible, and then turn around and change and be kind. So I don't like framing stories as like, oh, this is a positive one, this is a negative one. I want them to be accurate and real. And if you're really being accurate and real, then you're reflecting that diversity within a community. There are some challenging things. I don't think we should sugarcoat them. There are some amazing things. I think we should elevate them. So I think your second part of the question is where I feel is really kind of hits the nail on the head, which is, and the answer to that, as we all know, right, is bias, is that you have this confirmation bias in what you think about a community. So I'll give you an example. When I worked at KRON TV in San Francisco, which was my first on-air job, I was working as the East Bay, I used to call myself bureau chief because I was the only correspondent in the bureau. So I sort of named myself bureau chief, but it was a one-person bureau for a while. And I one day was in the office in San Francisco early in the morning for some reason, even though I lived in Oakland, and all the managers were coming in for their morning meeting. One of the bridges, I think, or some kind of bridge or tunnel or something was down, so everybody had to drive through Oakland who was coming in from some of the nicer areas of San Francisco. And in coming in, they're like, oh my God, I risked my life to drive through Oakland. Anybody who's driven through that area knows you're actually on a 5 or 6 lane highway. Like, you're not really driving through the streets of anywhere like any highway. And I remember thinking, like, I live in Oakland and I get this. This is a joke, kind of, sort of, right? And the joke is, like, I risked my life to drive through this horribly dangerous neighborhood. So those folks, by the way, were all coming in for the morning meeting, which would set the coverage of the day, right? It would set what stories we told about what communities. So we shouldn't be surprised that if the joke, is I risked my life to drive through Oakland, that the narrative of Oakland was going to be crime and drugs and poverty and all terrible, terrible things, right? Because that's pretty much how everybody saw it. I mean, obviously, it's the butt of a joke of the people who are running the coverage. And, for me, it was the moment that I knew I would leave that station, because it was like, here I am, I live in Oakland, right? So people don't even realize, they're like, you're making a joke about where I live. I mean, that's just, and it just made me realize, like, oh, this is not where I want to be. And I was young, so I didn't even think I could sort of say something. It was just awkward. So I think that that's the answer, right? Some of it is just bias, and some of it is how people feel about a community, and they need all those stories to confirm that. And then sometimes when they do the rare positive story, I have found something also offensive. It's always the foster mom who da-da-da-da-da, not a real story. Like, I think the stories of Oakland are really compelling. There are some terrible things in parts of Oakland and things that are happening. And there are some amazing people doing amazing, interesting things. And they're not all charitable things, right? They're business opportunities. There are business people who live there. There are also some stories that are just about land use and gentrification and what's happening in a community. I like to cover all of it. And so I think our demands should be around that the coverage should reflect the community, not be, a Pollyanna-ish positive and not be negative. Just, this is the community. Here's the story of a community.
I love that answer, and I can relate to that on so many different levels that we don't have time for today. But let me ask the next question. And as an organization, we've been really fortunate to have amazing women and men join us for these Hour of Power sessions. And one of our topics was the imposter syndrome, which is, of course, the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of their own efforts and skills. So my question to you is, you've had a lot of different accomplishments that you've attained as a journalist. And you attended Harvard, you've been a researcher, a producer, and the list goes on and on. However, I was reading just recently that once you found yourself the subject of a very lively conversation about being the affirmative action hire.
Same station, by the way. That was at KRON TV too.
And so I'm wondering, what advice would you give to our listening leaders who may find themselves in the same situation, and how would you advise that they handle these situations while still maintaining confidence and understanding your own value?
I've never had a lot of imposter, what did you call it? The imposter syndrome, sorry, imposter syndrome. And my husband would probably say, like, yes, sometimes your overconfidence is misplaced. But I think it's because I tend to look and see what I need to be in that job and try to get there as fast as I possibly can. And so even when the story goes at the station in San Francisco, I was walking up, I mean, it's so embarrassing. I was walking up to a conversation because I was new, I was brand new, and I was from New York, so I didn't even know anybody in town. And these people are talking about the new affirmative action hire. And then but they all stop talking when I get there. So obviously I realized, like, oh, it's me. And it didn't really matter all the things that I had accomplished. Obviously, I was just seen as this thing. The irony is one of the people in that conversation was a young white woman who we had the same kind of gig. We were new on-air people who'd been brought in as young people, not working full-time, but working mostly almost full-time. So she was the white version of me. I mean, so anyway. So I think the answer is really the answer that my mom gave me as an immigrant woman to this country, which is you have to really ignore a lot of stuff, or you're going to end up arguing and fighting battles and being pulled kind of out of sorts in ways that are not going to be conducive to building your career, right? Like, honestly, who cares at the end of the day? And if you sit down and you end up having all of those conversations, and by the way, it's a great little conversation to start off an article that was in my New York Times op-ed, or to tell people later when you write your memoirs. But if you fight all those battles every day, you're going to be freaking exhausted. You know what? You should have that conversation with your girlfriend over a glass of wine, period, full stop, because you'll lose your mind. And I think one of the things that I see in corporate America is a lot of the Black women and men sometimes, you spend so much energy on all the other stuff that's happening that it can sap you for the rest of it. And I think it's really important to conserve your energy. My mom was very good at the whole, you just need to ignore people. Put your head down and do what you need to do. What are you going for? And if your job at this particular job is to get X, go get X. Keep your eyes on the prize and literally do not be dragged off into these little sidebar conversations, because one day you'll pick your head up and you'll be like, oh, I'm over here, and I've accomplished this thing, which was nowhere near the bigger thing I needed to get to. And I think that that's really important, just staying on track and not being sidelined by stupidity, because you'll really lose your mind and sap your energy. And nobody likes an annoyed, frustrated, angry person.
All right, Soledad, it is such a pleasure to meet you. This is a perfect follow-up to my next question, which continues to be about corporate values, organizational values, and who gets into these rooms where decisions are made. So sometimes this side conversation can be indicative of how people think and how people make choices. And you have said in the past, who's in the room is never accidental, and that it explains the hierarchy and the values of an organization. And so we have a lot of young leaders on with us today. We want to know, what is your advice for them to getting into the room where it happens, if I can quote Hamilton for a second.
Come on, rap it for us. Come on.
Right. I know. And then for our seasoned leaders, as Burnadette would say, a lot of whom are the decision makers of who gets in the room. Just looking at what we're dealing with today, what's your advice for them on what they should be thinking about ultimately to make their organizations more effective in terms of the diversity of who gets in their rooms?
It's such a great follow-up question. So I'll start with another story. When I was at WBZ TV, I used to be the morning associate producer. The morning show was on before the Today Show. And our show ended at 7:00, which is when the Today Show would start. And I would finish my show and I would run to the bathroom and I would grab coffee and I would come to the morning meeting, which was started at 7. And of course, I'd get in at 7:05 because I had to do those things. Our show was getting off the air. And there was a guy in the meeting who said to me almost every single time, "Oh, look at the time, 7:05. Guess who's running on CP time? Look who's late to the meeting again." Every time. I was so mad. I would go home and come up with witty comebacks. When he says this, I'm going to say this. When he does this, I'm going to do this, et cetera, et cetera. You all know this. His name was John. Every day, every single day. And it really was a distraction and very upsetting to me, frankly. And I never really told anybody. I just had I'm going to have this witty comeback that I've been thinking about all night, and then maybe he wouldn't say something. One day, I got promoted. I left. I went to NBC News to start producing, and I never saw him again. And the world of TV news is like this big. I never saw him again, literally, ever. And I look back now and I think, what a waste of my energy and time on John, who I never saw again. And I always tell the young people, so that's not the fight to be having. That was a waste of my energy. And I tell that story to remind people, literally, it's been 30 years since I left that job. I haven't bumped into him anywhere. So don't do that, right? The bigger argument is the in the room argument and the access to power argument, right? That's the important conversation to be having. So when you're young and you're new, you need to figure out where is the power and how do I get close to that power. And generally the answer is on achieving assignments, getting placed into something that's going to challenge you and executing well. So that means knowing the people who are making those assignments, making it clear that you're interested in those assignments, those stretch assignments, and then executing on them. And the execution part can be broken down further too. Executing by making sure you're clear on the deliverables, executing by making sure you're talking to people who are helping you around, hey, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do, et cetera, executing on making sure that it's delivered on time and that everybody's happy. We all know that in corporate America, kind of what is said sometimes has a translation that is different about delivering. So you have to know who can help you. They said, keep this to 5 pages. It's coming in 7 pages. Is that cool? Is that bad? Is it good? That kind of thing. Someone who can say, oh my gosh, he always says 5 pages. He really wants 10 pages, et cetera, et cetera. So that to me is the kind of conversation and strategizing to be happening. Not, oh, they said I'm an affirmative action person. Oh, John says I'm running on CP time. That John is nobody. And that chick who said that was a nobody and was not worthy of any of my energy. The energy should be spent upward, investing in yourself. And so I think for people who are relatively young and new, all your energy should go there. What do you need? I want you to know I'm interested in this assignment. How can I be helpful? What are the projects that this company is doing? What does this company really believe in? What are we doing that I need to be thinking about so that I'm part of where the company's going, not part of where the company has been? And for people who are more seasoned, I like that. I think the luxury is you are in some of those rooms. And so I believe the onus is on you to say, you know who's amazing that nobody knows is Jane Doe. She's so great. She's toiling away over here. I mean, I used to work weird hours, right? So in some jobs I was leaving at 9 o'clock in the morning when the bosses were coming in. I never ran into my bosses. You needed people who could say, before we begin this meeting, I just want to send a shout out to Jane Doe. She actually works the weird hours, so you guys won't see her. Or if you guys would do a favor, there's a young woman who's working on this project and blah, 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 blah. You guys should know that she's been great, and I'd love for you to send her a note. Your obligation, I believe, is to also take that young, let's call her Jane Doe, and tell Jane Doe, you know what? You are in a place where you're not being seen. I need you to come to this event. I need you to learn how to network. I'm going to introduce you to 4 people. You're going to talk to them in informational interviews when we all get back in a room together and can have coffee. I'm going to help you. I'm going to tell you, no, you cannot wear that. No, that skirt's too short. It is not too short for life. It is too short for the way this office is. If you want to be promoted here, you need to wear something more like this. The kind of advice and friendship that we all got from people, right? Who said, let me help you help yourself. And I think that's the kind of opportunity people who are more seasoned have in order to make sure that we're prepping people to be in that room eventually. You got to lay the groundwork in people's ears, and you also have to make sure that the young people are prepared. A lot of the young scholars that I work with, my husband and I run this foundation for young women, they didn't grow up with parents who worked in offices. So that they don't know. There's a whole culture of an office. A lot of people, they're young, they don't know the culture of an office. I remember when people would start, especially the Gen Zers that we had in our office, and I would say, the shoot's at 8:30. Well, a shoot at 8:30 means you're actually on set at 8. But no one told them. I mean, how would you know? If you didn't grow up working in TV news, how would you know? Someone has to tell you. I know I said 8:30. Here's the translation. 8:00:00. We roll tape at 8:30. And I think that's an opportunity for seasoned people to, if they can help their own organization with good people rising in the ranks, it also helps the seasoned person. You become a trusted advisor. You yourself, that elevates your own position within the organization. So you have to make sure you're promoting good people. And the way we promote good people is to get them to be good. Most people aren't good when they start. They have a lot of potential. You got to help them get there. I think it's as simple as that. But if you get distracted by the stupid stuff, you won't get there, right? You're going to be, oh, I know that. I know her. Isn't she always in HR complaining about that guy in the office? Yes, and it could be a very valid complaint, but I will tell you realistically, people are not going to think that that's a good thing. They just won't. They just won't. I mean, that's why I never complained about John, because I could have every day gone into HR and complained. And he would deserve it. But as people who are often the victims of that become the whiners that nobody wants to hear from. And it does have a backlash. And I think realistically in an office, you have to navigate that very carefully.
I agree. Absolutely. Because what can happen is that somehow people think it's your fault.
Of course.
Maybe you're doing something wrong.
Always. I was once on a subway train, and a guy started picking into my handbag, right? And I was like, this is so weird. My handbag was doing all, and I leaned down and his hand was in my tote bag. Now, luckily I'm a slob and I have so much stuff in my bag that he couldn't figure out what was my wallet. But I started shrieking. And you know what happens on the subway train? People are like, those 2 people are crazy, and they step back. And I think you're right? As soon as there's a thing, it just becomes messy. I become as crazy as the guy whose hand is in my handbag, who's completely at fault. But no one knows for sure, so they step back from both of us because they can't really tell.
In this time where we are experiencing this national or international pandemic, we have high job loss, uncertainty, and some people are caught up in having to transition as a result. What advice would you give to women who will be forced to make such transitions? And the reason why you're the person to ask that advice is because you've been a full-time employed journalist and television news anchor at some of media's leading enterprises. But you successfully pivoted from working for a large organization to leading your own media company. So share some of your knowledge in this regard.
It's a very different time, right? I mean, a global pandemic, and I think people are just very, 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 very stressed. And I'm not even sure I'm good at this, but I do think the answer in dealing with your transition is being kind of kind to yourself. right? Like to some degree, you have to still lay out a plan. I'm a big list maker, I'm a big planner. I like to kind of know strategy. List making is really helpful for me. So I think that's a very good strategy if it gives you comfort. I know lists freak out some people, but for me, a list kind of tells me here's my day, here's my week, here's my month, and I can cross that out and I feel better. But I think a lot of it is in just kind of being kind to yourself. You know, we are not going to come through a global pandemic having lost 10 pounds, working out all the time, all eating, you know, clean eating, paleo, vegan, whatever. Wait, we're not. We are not. You know what we're going to do? We're going to try to get through it. Literally, like that's the goal. The goal is on the ground. We're going to step over that and we're just going to get through it. And we're going to say, you know what we did? We got through it. And so I think that that to me is a little bit of the strategy now. And so the list making for me is how do we get through it? I tried to put pillars. Here's what I want to do. I want to make sure that my staffers are all employed. We're not going to lay anybody off. Okay, well, if that's going to be a value pillar for us, what does that mean? How do we do that? Okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to take on? What do we need to shed in order to make sure that I can look the staff in the eye and say, in an environment where people are being laid off like crazy, and in journalism where the industry itself is imploding to a large degree, I can say, you know, we are all going to have jobs, but I'm going to need everybody to kind of step up and do things maybe they haven't done before. We're not going to grow. We're not going to staff up. We're going to keep everybody working. That was an important value for me. So once I started with that, right, then I could kind of deconstruct, okay, how do we get to that? So I think it's a lot about just kindness and setting out a strategy and understanding in crazy times. I had a boss once who said, you know, there's opportunity in chaos. I think people now are more available, right? So if you've had a boss or a person who, or somebody, anybody that you want to talk to, you probably can get them on the phone in a Zoom call, right? If you're someone who said, I always wanted to chat about this, or I want to make a transition here and I wanted to talk to this person, they really don't have an excuse. They're home and they can be on Zoom. And that's a good opportunity. I also think that, you know, there's a lot of, you know, some ways more time. Most people are not commuting unless they're a, you know, someone who's an essential worker. To a large degree, I don't go into the office very frequently. So those things are actually positives. And so I think you have to kind of, again, because I'm a list maker, make an assessment. What are the positives? Okay, there's going to be a transition. And I've been fired off of shows and I had to make a transition. And I think my attitude was very helpful. I was like, okay, here's what we're doing. What do we like about it? What can we try to tweak? And when you go in that way, I think you come out the other side saying, here's what we were able to achieve, as opposed to being doom and gloom and it's never going to work. We've all been with those people, right? It's never going to work. And you're kind of like, well, I don't want you on my team then, right? If you're it's never going to work. And by the way, it might not work, but we can't start from there. We have to start with, all right, what are the assets we have and how do we use those assets? Even if it's in your own resume, what do you have? What are you trying to get to? Let's make a list to make that transition.
Very good, very good. Soledad, what are a couple of the most inspirational stories you've covered recently that you may have taken leadership, that you may have taken a leadership lesson away from, and you think our audience might find instructive?
Oh my gosh, a couple. There's a great story we did. It's on HBO. If you guys get HBO, go. We did it for Real Sports. I'm a correspondent for Real Sports. And it's about a little boy who's 11, and he is a triathlete. And he's an old soul, but he's 11, little kid, glasses that he keeps pushing up his nose. And his name is Braden. And he was a triathlete and had a little brother who's 9.5 years old, who was severely mentally disabled. He was born with something very wrong with his brain, and so he really can't do any functions at all. And he started doing triathlons with his little brother because his brother can smile and laugh. And he found that when he would take him on these triathlons, which was swimming and running and biking, that his brother would just laugh through the entire thing. That's my puppy crying in the background because the cat has walked in. That dynamic is crazy. And so we did a story about how he was training for triathlons. They pick up his brother. They made a special raft for the brother who cannot move. He's basically trapped in his body. And they strap him in, and he swims with his brother. And then they take the brother and they put him on a little thing for the bike, and he bikes with his brother. And then he also, what did I say, swim, bike, and run. He would do the same thing. So he'd do this triathlon. And I would say to him, and everyone would say, like, he's a great athlete. He would win. And it was so amazing to see an 11-year-old tell you, but like, what would be the joy in winning? Like, we're a team. And that sometimes, you figure it out to make the team successful. Sure, could he win if he ditched his brother? Yeah, probably. He's a good athlete. But then the whole reason for doing something would be gone. And I really loved that because I thought the metaphor, it really made me think about my business, right? It was like, it's not about just, I need to go do this. It's about we have a team and we have stories we want to create and we have things that we want to do. And it takes the entire team to do it. Not just me, everybody pulling and pushing and getting there. And I just remember thinking, like, this guy is an old soul who really understands the value of teamwork and helping everybody get ahead so that they can do very well. So he was just a great kid and a great story. The terrible kicker, if you will, in this story was that his brother's 9.5 years old. His life expectancy is 10. And I would say, right, so the parents were crying and kids like this because according to the dad, they just kind of pass away in their sleep because they have such a hard time breathing. And I said to the young boy, what are you doing next? Like, you're coming up on what is it? I hated asking it, but of course you have to. And he said, I just don't believe it. We're training for the Iron Man. And, and like and it wasn't a delusional, like, we're training for I was like, until I get proof of something else, we're marching forward in this. And it was just so amazing for a kid who's 11 to really have an understanding about kind of the meaning of what you're doing. I don't know that everybody gets the meaning of what they're doing. I think a lot of people don't really get it. But for a lot of people, what they're trying to do is achieve as a team and make sure that they're able to get there and do good work as a team. And he was just a wonderful, wonderful story. And that show generally is just great, I think, for those kinds of inspirational stories told through the prism of sports.
I love that. And where did that appear? That was on HBO, right?
HBO Real Sports is a show that airs on HBO. Bryant Gumbel is the anchor and has been for a long time, and they win gobs of awards. Like they have an insane number of awards everywhere. They've been doing the show, I think, for 25 or 30
We are
years.
very familiar.
Yeah. So it's a great show. Yeah, and they have a mobile app, HBO Go, so that you can watch old episodes of the show and see those stories.
Great. Bernadette, thank you for that brief follow-up because it gave me a moment to collect myself from that story.
Oh.
That was impactful. I'm definitely going to go and check out that story. All right, so Soledad, my next question. This is my first time meeting you, but you are no stranger to women of color. In fact, you penned a 2016 article for our Women Lead magazine entitled, "If You're Not Intentional, the Images Won't Change." Now, that fall 2016 issue happened to be out about a month before the election of Donald Trump. And we've noticed as a journalist, you have very strong views about first agreeing that facts are facts, but more importantly, to intentionally tell more diverse stories. So in that 4-year period since you wrote that article for us, can you just give us your reflections and thoughts on the state of our American story and our images?
Yeah, listen, I think one thing that we did when I started doing Matter of Fact, which was right before that election, was and the reason I started doing that show with Hearst was they were very interested in diversity. And when people say diversity, I try to usually run like the wind because I don't know that they mean it, right? Because I'm sort of like, okay, but like, are we doing this? Because if we're not really doing it, then let's not bother. And I certainly don't need to be part of it. But they wanted the tagline for the show to be stories as diverse as America itself, which I thought was a great tagline, and that we were going to start tracking, like on a spreadsheet, who we were putting on the air, which I love because I think one of the challenges that we have, and again, back to the conversation about bias, sometimes people say it's, unintentional bias. Sometimes it's fully intentional bias. But even, I noticed in myself, if you say to me, Soledad, put an economist on TV, you know who I'll start looking for? Old white dudes in their late 60s, right? Because that to me in my head is an economist. And I have to literally think about like, oh, that's a bias of mine. Let me see who else is out there who'd be great. And just very intentionally decide we're going to open up the options of what an economist who's talking on TV could be. And once you start doing that and you have a team around you that is challenging you for that and also pushing to make the stories themselves more inclusive. So for example, and inclusive is not a word that I like just because I don't think it captures what we're trying to do exactly. But for example, if we're talking about in the coronavirus times, how many people are actually on the verge of being evicted, I can't just talk to a person who has studied it. I also want an expert who's living it, right? Because this is their story. And so we're going to make sure that we hand them the mic. They get to be part of that story. And again, holding ourselves, the reason we really realized when we would fail to do it, I was doing a story on millennial voting with a very nice guy who's must have been 45 years old, talking about millennials. And I was like, wait a minute. We need a millennial voter. And we asked her the $64,000 question. Why don't you vote? That's so she's an expert. So I think really just being intentional all the time and sort of going back to go to the chart. People will tell me, in my heart, I know, and I'm a good person, and I just don't feel good about quotas. I don't think we don't have quotas. We want to see if we are actually doing the thing that we tell people we're doing. If we're telling people we are going to be diverse and we're going to have a lot of different voices and we're going to cover different communities, I think I'm amazing and I do a great job at it. But why don't we also track it to make sure? I once had a conversation with Jeff Immelt. And I said to him, you don't really track the women of color who are or the women generally who are leaving your organization. But if this were refrigerators, you would, right? Because we track the things we care about. We make sure to understand it. So it's as simple as that. And I think everyone can do that. I think the American vision right now is where, journalism is a very bad place, especially political journalism. It's just a complete hot mess. They just don't know how to deal with Donald Trump, and you can see it day in and day out. And the White House correspondents are just not prepared for this moment, and also see an opportunity to kind of get some fame out of it, and that's a bad combination, I think, personally. But generally speaking, I think we're having more uncomfortable conversations about who's in the room and who's the face and how should the story be told and what's the point of view. And I was pitching a story the other day, a show, and someone said to me, yeah, but what about gentrification? Let me promise you, in my 2 years, no one has ever in their life said, but what about gentrification? But now people are actually thinking, if we're going to do a home improvement show, like, shouldn't this be something at least we're talking about in the meeting? And I thought it was great. I thought it was great that it wasn't me raising it. It was them raising it. So I think we're making progress. I think the only way to make progress is to have uncomfortable conversations sometimes and hold people accountable and tell people, if you genuinely believe, if you're telling me now you want a third of the staff to be diverse, whatever that is, whatever that definition is, then let's write that down, and we're going to pick you, Steve. You're responsible for measuring it. And you, Jane, are responsible for updating us every month on where we are and are we close to our goal. And it's as simple as that. But when people don't do it, it's because they don't really want to do it. We all know that, right? In anything we do, if we don't really want to do it, it just kind of, gets frittered away and gets lost. So it's just a matter of really, we found for our show, by the way, in doing this, our ratings are great, our demographics are the best, our audience is younger than other people's audiences. It's been very, very good for us. All those positive things have happened. And we've opened up a window to just other interesting people who now get practice being on the air on my show and then can go be on other shows, which I like.
As the CEO of a company that employs people and does projects globally, what critical evaluations and hard decisions have you had to make this year in order to manage through this pandemic? Mm-hmm. And have you found any unexpected bright spots, things that were positive?
Yeah, I'll start with bright spots. So for our foundation, we lost our executive director, and I know you're talking about the company, but I'll talk about the foundation first. Our executive director left to take another job kind of at the end of the year. And so I was just beginning interviewing to replace her when the pandemic happened. So we had not invested in a gala, which we normally would have done. So we hadn't laid out a lot of cash for that kind of stuff, which had been completely accidental, but very, very good, because none of that would have been recoupable. And we had really just a young woman who's our accountant, our bookkeeper. Our young woman who's an accountant bookkeeper as we kept going through, and she started joining our company calls because we wanted everybody every day to check in and have conversations about what was going on. What I learned about her was so interesting. She'd run away from home, living on her own since she was 18, et cetera, and so involved emotionally in the work that we were doing that she has stepped up to take over the executive director role. 100%. She will check in with the young women. And this young woman, she used to work 2 days a week as our bookkeeper, and has, and writes the most beautiful letters, follows up with everybody, just at a time when we're so busy on this other front. To have someone step up masterfully, it's phenomenal. And I tell her all the time, I'm like, you are just, what an amazing blessing at a time in the foundation when anybody who's doing nonprofit work understands, like, it's very, very challenging. It's just remarkable to have people step up. And so she's been probably the greatest silver lining of a really crazy time. And I don't think that would have ever happened. I don't think I would have given her the opportunity. I don't think I would have believed in her ability. I would have been like, you're a really great 2-day-a-week bookkeeper. She's phenomenal. We found the same thing within our company too. The number of people who, because normally we'd have an outside company come in to manage our technology and our data, and we'd have kind of these jobs that we'd hire out for, but we can't really do right now. The number of staffers who've stepped up to say, well, I could do that. I could manage that. I could run that. I'm just blown away. I'm just blown away. There are days where I'm like, I'm dying to get on my Zoom call. I don't know how to handle that. And so many people, I think, because they appreciate that we made a commitment to keep everybody employed, and we made a commitment to them, redoubled their commitment back to us. And I'm honestly, I'm almost speechless about it, because it's such an incredible thing to see somebody who's, it's not their job and it's not what they do, and they're like, well, I think I could figure this out. I've now watched enough. I'd like you to let me handle this. It's amazing. So I think that has actually been a silver lining in our company, and I think we're going to come through the other end. Again, I'm not here trying to create heroes, but we're continue to be profitable. We continue to do work. We continue to just, I think our goal is to hold on until we can get through it and start really shooting in the field again. And I've been amazed at how our staffers have all just been phenomenal. So I think that is a silver lining.
Great. And I think that also holds true for women of color staff. So if you're on the line, just know that we appreciate you as well. Our next question, and this has been something that's been in the news just lately, and there's been a lot of discussion in the media about the conservative movement to dismantle the post office. And it's no secret that many women of color are post office employees, and the post office has been a lifeline to lift families into the middle class, particularly people of color. And so I'm wondering, from a media standpoint, do you think it would be more helpful or hurtful to highlight how cuts to the post office are really directly or would direct and impact people of color, and why?
Yeah, I think so. I think just because it's part of the story, and again, I don't even think helpful or hurtful. I think it's just the facts of it. I think the facts of it that the post office is the last mile delivery for a lot, even, big delivery companies often in rural areas use the post office, right, to take the last mile. That people who need their medications. I hadn't really thought about it until there were so many stories about people's medications or chicks. I didn't know you could even send chicks in the mail. Who knew you could buy chicks and ship them in the mail? But when the post office slows down. So I think any way that you can explain to people the idea that for a lot of families, a middle class existence came about because of the post office, which serves the American people, is hugely positive. And yes, a lot of those people are women of color. So absolutely, just because, not because it's helpful or hurtful, but because it's a fact. It's just a fact. Just like I think the idea that, the post office delivers to rural communities where no one else will go. The postman will go or postwoman will go and drop off something, and that's hugely important. I think all of those narratives are very important, and I'm always an advocate of making sure that the numerous narratives around a story are elevated. One of the biggest challenges, I think, and I think the New York Times really failed on this front, and others did too, that the narrative out of the election was sort of the working class, which is no one saying the white working class. Like, they call the working class, but we're all like, we know who you're talking about. And so it's really like they just cared about the white working class, the disaffected white working class, as if other people are not struggling too, and that those other people don't have stories to share as well. And I think that's a mistake. I think we should be using media to elevate all of these important narratives. They really matter, and they help us understand what's happening in our country.
So Soledad, I have the next question, and I'm going to go a little bit off script here because I see in our chat so many of our participants are really interested in that conversation about mentorship versus sponsorship. And they're actually chatting about it, alluding to one of the conversations we had earlier. So, and one of the things we all notice is you are so self-actualized and just grounded in your own power. So just give us your own reflections of perhaps a little bit about your background. Did you have mentors? Did you have sponsors? How did you get so self-actualized? And for people who are really interested in this topic, what should the leaders with us be doing to help folks?
I've never been self-actualized before, so I love it. Thank you. I'm going to tell everybody, I'm going to make my children say that now. I think a couple things. One, I grew up, my parents are an interracial couple. I grew up born in the 1960s and lived in a very white community of Long Island, and that had made for its awkward moments, because I wouldn't say people were overtly racist, but they were kind of non-overtly racist many times. But I think that's kind of a classic. Growing up Black in America as a teenager, you sort of get hit in the face with things, metaphorically. But I do think it allowed me to see a lot of issues in a community. And so I think it was helpful to me as a reporter. Growing up in a very, at first, non-diverse and then more diverse community. I think my biggest strength was in my flexibility. I genuinely, when plan A doesn't work out, I go to plan B. When plan B doesn't work out, I go to plan C. I will go all the way down to plan Z and just be like, yep, yeah, that didn't work. And my mom used to say, take a 24 hours to cry about it and eat ice cream and sit in bed. But like at hour 25, you have to start, make your list. what is the next steps? And that was very helpful to me. So I literally do that. I would sit in bed with a pint of Ben and Jerry's. And then, and then I'd be like, well, I guess it's not all bad because, it looks like I could do this. And I'd write that down. And then by the end of the next day, I'd have like kind of an action plan. And I'd be like, well, it's actually an action plan I kind of like. And sometimes it was over a boyfriend who had dumped me, or sometimes it was over a job that wasn't quite working out. But I do think I was very good at like getting through the drama relatively quickly and moving on to the action plan. And I think that flexibility is a very good skill, and I think people can figure it out. But I think I tried to go into circumstances where I could save as much money as I could so that I didn't have to do the things I didn't want to do. I tried to really just be financially not beholden to things. And so that meant, when I bought my first apartment, that it wasn't, and people, anybody who's bought any property, right? The realtor takes some number and they're like, you can afford a house that, and you're like, yes, if I never eat again, and wear these sweats every day, sure. But it terrified me so much that it always made me kind of go lower, and to make sure, like, I'm going to assume all the worst things happen. I lose my job. I can't find another. Can I still pay for this place? And it was kind of how both my husband and I navigated it. We called it a little bit of a FU fund, frankly. Like, if your job isn't working out, could you say, I so appreciate you guys having me. I am going to go, but thank you. And thinking about how you create that fund, and our fund was not a big fund, but it was just enough that you could go for 6 months or 10 months or a year and not dramatically have to change everything. So, but that required packing away money and really saving. For me, it meant I could start my company because I had money saved from when I was working at CNN. And it meant I could rent a space and do all of these things because, we had kind of lived within our means. And I think that actually probably is what helped me a lot with self-actualization, that when I was working, I just made sure to save a lot of money, as much as I possibly could. And that meant that when bad things happened, or when people I didn't like came into my world, I didn't have to say yes. I had experience once in the newsroom in San Francisco where a guy I worked with, he just suddenly, his bosses were like, well, we need you to move to San Jose. It was 90-minute drive. They added 90 minutes to his commute every day. And that was in no traffic. And I just was like, oh my gosh, that's an insane addition to your commute. And he's like, well, what can I do? I can't, I'm not in a position to do anything. And that scared me when I heard him say that. I was new in the business. I made no money, but I was like, oh my gosh, I don't really ever want to be in that position. I really don't. I want to be able to say, okay, well, obviously I'm going to do this for the rest of the year, or do this through my contract, but then I can say no and I can move on. So I think being a little bit financially independent sounds much more, fabulous than what I had. It just, being able to navigate it was really, really helpful. So for me also, I think finding mentors and sponsors, and again, I think of a mentor as someone who's going to give you advice and help you, and you can sit down and have coffee with them. But I think a sponsor is the person who's in that room saying, I believe in this person. I'm going to follow up with this person. I'm going to make them do this job well. I'm going to pitch them. I'm going to promote them, and I'm going to sit in meetings and defend them. And if anything's going wrong, I'm responsible for that person. I am their sponsor. I'm watching them rise through the career ladder because I believe in them. And I think both of those categories, mentors and sponsors, have to be cultivated. Some of that is in taking people's advice. Listen, I've had a lot of people who I'd give advice to and they just ignored it, which, listen, go ahead and ignore my advice. But it doesn't make me want to spend my next coffee hour giving you advice. And so, and also just keeping in touch with people. So for me, mentors are great. Can I ask you a question? I've got these 3 offers. Or can I ask you a question? I'm having this weird thing happen at work. Or can I ask you a question? And they just give you advice. And those people can be cultivated, and they're pretty easy to cultivate in a lot of ways. It's just kind of a relationship thing. It's hard now in coronavirus, but this will end. And we'll go back to more normalcy around those kind of group meetings. But sponsors, I think sponsors, you have to prove to them that you're worthy. And sponsors are, you have to show them the work and that you're willing to do the next level. And you need to have a constant dialogue around, how do I get an opportunity that I can stretch and go to the next level? So sponsorship is a much bigger ask, because you're asking people to put their necks out for you. You know, mentor can be like, yeah, I'm mentoring them. I take them out for coffee. Sponsoring is, they're responsible. They're going to go in a meeting and they're going to say, she will be a success. I guarantee it. So you have to deliver. And those people too have to be cultivated, and you have to prove to them that when they go into that meeting that you can do that thing. And so that's another kind of relationship as well.
Love it, love it. I first heard FU Fund from Paula Madison at one of our conferences many years ago. So that was really something I always remembered. But we want to go now, while Michelle prepares to summarize, and you will be very impressed, Soledad. I want to tell you when Michelle does the summary of what you've said. But Michelle will summarize what you've said. But before we do that, let's put up the first poll. And that poll is going to have to do with the organizational strategic focus that we have for the Women of Color Empowerment Institute. So Kamala, if you can pull that up, that would be great. And I will tell you what you're going to be looking at. We want you all to help us in terms of identifying the things that we'll be looking at next year, when we'll be full blown, hopefully, past this coronavirus. And our organizational strategic focuses have to do with building awareness of healthcare disparities, disease and social ills that disproportionately impact women of color, providing mentorship opportunities that create paths to leadership for women of color, such as our professional mentorship program, supporting and encouraging women leaders to run and win public office, developing capacities for social change that will empower women to transform communities, developing programming that will increase and promote heritage awareness through open discussion and community outreach, combating stereotypes and double standards and bias against women, providing training opportunities for business and government, serving as a clearinghouse for research and conference materials associated with our Women of Color Empowerment Conference, and finally, focusing on uniting women of color with multicultural differences, which we've had some forums on, and they have always been very, very interesting. So we may be having technical problems, I'm assuming, if the poll is not up. I don't know, Kamala or Lynn, either one. Okay, there we go. So if you all will go ahead and weigh in very quickly on this. There you go. Perfect. So if you can look at that and choose, I don't see all of the options, but if this is all that we could get on the page, that will be just fine.
No, you just scroll down.
Yep, all the options are there, Bernadette. They just need to scroll.
Thank you. Please go through this, give us a little feedback on the areas that you would like to see the Women of Color Empowerment Institute focus more on. We focused on all of these issues over the past several years, but we want to really, as we're in this interesting time of COVID, it's also giving us some opportunity to plan, and you're helping us with our retreat that's upcoming, and we'd like to hear your opinion on these things. So while we're waiting for that, I do want to mention, go on to nationalwomenofcolor.com for all of the interesting programming that we'll be doing. We'll have a leadership development program later just this month with Nancy Allen, and we're very excited about that. We also will have a number of different, we'll have some check-ins that we'll do. We'll have some beach socially distant activities for those of you who live in South Florida, where we'll do a little yoga and walking by the beach and socially distance ourselves. We'll also have a lot of other interesting programs that will be forthcoming. We want you to join us in those. And so hopefully you've had a chance to select that. And let's go ahead and take the poll down, Kamala. Thank you. We'll do the last poll at the very end of the session. We'll go ahead and let Michelle summarize Soledad O'Brien's talk with us today. This has truly been an hour of power.
Again, thank you, Soledad, for being here with us this morning. It is empowering. My problem right now is that Burnadette set up this Michelle's going to be fantastic thing that I have to live up to. But here is what I think are the highlights of what you contributed to us this morning. You told us that reflecting the truth about communities is what journalism should do. Not any Pollyannish positive. For example, like, this is what this minority community foster mom did, etc. But everything about the community, including businesses, business opportunities, activities that they're engaged in. That way it reflects the facts. It's not a positive or a negative, but we have all of it. When faced with the words about affirmative action that you had to hear, what your advice to us is, don't focus on these negative comments or things that may be hurtful, because it winds up being a waste of your time. If you're a leader and you're trying to be strategic, you should focus on the deliverables. You're in business, you're working for this company. What is the goal of any assignment? And then make it happen. And generally, that means that that's how you get in the room. If you want to know how you get in the room where it happens, well, you focus on the deliverables and you succeed. Of course, everybody needs help. So you set those goals to excel. You have your task, your list, you figure it out, and then you find assistants, mentors, people who guide you through it. Again, talking about journalism, you told us that journalism must be intentional. If you're challenging yourself as a journalist, you need to talk to the people living the reality of your story, rather than just someone talking about people who are living that reality, who become experts on those people or that group. And you gave us an example. You basically said that there was this one scenario in which you were talking about evictions, and then instead of having the person that would be evicted or has suffered it speak, people were scrambling around looking for some expert on evictions. And you also said uncomfortable conversations must be had in order for you to get to that point of being intentional. And then once you have made the decision as a journalist, or in any other field of activity, really, you have to have set goals and you have to measure them. If you don't have the goals and a measurement mechanism, you're never going to get to that truth. During this time of the pandemic, you somehow managed to find a silver lining in your business activities as well as in your foundation. An example that comes to mind is the bookkeeper. Your bookkeeper at the foundation, who had skills that you were unaware of, managed to shine and come through, stepping up to become an executive director. And there are others in your corporation also doing the same, whether it's in the technical field or otherwise. And that's the silver lining. You also added that you continue to make a profit, which is a great silver lining in these times. When questioned about the post office, you explained how you've learned through the communications that and the journalism of today on the topic, how it is used, how basic it is, how needed it is, since it's often the last link in the rural areas, the last mile to get something delivered. And the medications that are needed. We use the post office for them. We're talking about the vote, but they are just basic things that people need. And people of color are affected, as well as others. So we need to talk about the rural areas. We need to talk about the urban areas. We need to talk about everyone. Again, you seem to focus on one thing, which is get the facts, the reality of it. And you found for yourself that your biggest strength is your flexibility. You said you were a planner. And as a planner, you have a plan A, B, C. You may even get to plan Z if need be, and that permits you to achieve. You said that you believe that if you have a major debacle, you can cry for 24 hours, eat ice cream, but then you need to start your action plan by hour 25. No time to waste. In order to achieve, you have to have a plan and you have to get on working it. You described it as what created for you your self-actualization. And importantly, you reminded us that all of this prideful, strong, let's get to the next level requires an FU fund. Because at the end of the day, if you can't afford it, you can't do it. So to become a truly independent person, you have to be able to have independent means. And when you work, you're saving and not living above your means. And finally, with respect to the mentors and the sponsors, you've described them in a way that is memorable. That mentor is the person who's having coffee with you and helping you navigate the complexities of your life or your work life. But the sponsor is someone else. It's a more difficult person to cultivate, but it's someone who is in your space where you are aspiring to achieve and is defending you when need be. And that person is in the room, has impact within the organizational structure that you're in. And that person defends you, but is also assisting you in helping you deliver, which you say is the key to achieving, basically. And we thank you so much for your guidance. You've been extraordinary. And now that I think I've documented it, you're memorable, but you'll be remembered because we'll have it in writing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it. And I'm reading now all the comments. And thank you for all those comments and notes. I appreciate them.
We appreciate you so much. In addition to the people who are on Zoom, we are also streaming live and getting a lot of comments through Facebook and other different social media mediums. So we will let you go at this time if you need to, Soledad. If you don't, please feel free to join us. I do have a few announcements to make to the folks who are still on with us, and we cannot thank you enough. So I will give you a virtual clap.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Yes, we appreciate you so much, and we hope to be in touch and think of us as your South Florida network, because we want to do everything that we can to promote opportunities that you find yourself in front of and things that you're doing right now. So do you want to give us just how we can find you, what we can watch?
Sure. Best way is on Twitter, which is at Soledad O'Brien, or Instagram. We do Matter of Fact, which airs in South Florida. And also I have a correspondent for Real Sports. And we've got lots of projects that are unfolding. I'm an executive producer, so I'm not in them, but I'd love for you guys to support them. And I'm hoping to get to South Florida myself when it becomes winter here, because you know I'm a delicate flower, to get to you guys. So we're going to have to see what the state of the world is and the state of the nation this winter. But I have my... And if my children are actually going to be in school or if they're going to be in remote school. But once we figure that out, that'll give us some opportunities to figure that out.
Well, let us know. We will fully embrace you, sister. And thank you.
What a pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, Soledad. So what we have next, ladies, we want to just go ahead and tell you really quickly, and men, I know we have a few good men on the line. We appreciate you all being on as well. But we want you to know about some of the things that we have upcoming. A lot is going on, particularly for those of you who are interested in election issues and what you can do to make sure that you get the vote out. Obviously, we're a 501c3 organization with a mission to enhance and expand leadership by women of color. However, we are tied into very much into promoting the voting efforts, not any particular candidate, but certainly voting in general. And so we want you to be involved with us if you'd like to do that. We have a group that we're working with called Tri-County Black Voters Network. Here in South Florida, if you are in South Florida, and it's basically a collaboration with Palm Beach County, Miami-Dade County, and Broward County. Tomorrow we have a call at 4 o'clock if you're interested in being on a call where there will be some interesting information that we disseminated about technology and how it can be used to further our voting outreach efforts. And so go ahead and you can write to wocempowerment@gmail.com. Again, that's wocempowerment@gmail.com. And there'll be more information about that once we receive your email. Of course, we talked a little bit about the ways to find us, and I am going to tell you that you can go to Women of Color Empowerment Institute National Women of Color on Facebook. You can find us at National Women of Color. If you're in South Florida, you can find us at SFLWOC, which stands for South Florida Women of Color. If you are in the Atlanta chapter, welcome Atlanta members. You can also go to Metro Atlanta Women of Color, and we have a presence there. We are on LinkedIn at Women of Color Empowerment Institute, Inc. We are on Twitter at SFLWOC. We're at Instagram at Women of Color Empowerment Institute and also SFLWOC. So there are a lot of ways to stay in touch with us and stay connected. We hope you'll go on, like us, love us, comment, share this video with your friends. We do have it posted on Facebook, and feel free to share it. If you've gained any interesting information and you'd like to be more involved with our organization, you can find us again at nationalwomenofcolor.com. You can also become a member through nationalwomenofcolor.com. It's a really easy way to keep up with us. We do have a lot of things that may not be open generally to the public. Our membership is very inexpensive for all of the things that you get with it. And if you are currently a member and you haven't updated your membership in a while, we invite you to go on and re-engage with us and pay your membership fees, which helps us to produce great programming like this. The leaders and everybody that we're able to get, they're not free most of the time. So we do invest in you all, and we invest in the community. Kathy and Michelle, is there anything that you would like to add? Okay, hearing none, hearing nothing at this time, we are going to sign off. Don't forget to share this. Don't forget to become a member, and don't forget to like us on the different social media platforms. We hope you have a wonderful day and that you've enjoyed this Hour of Power with Soledad O'Brien. Have a great day.